welcome back to the channel. I hope you're having a good one. Today, for this video, I mainly wanted to essentially talk about the apexes in Path of Titans. And just essentially the power dynamic that's across the board here. So, a lot of you guys who are, well versed in PvP or know the stats, even keeping up with updates and everything, will know that over time, the apexes have changed quite a lot, and nowadays there are two apexes that are like the best of the best, and these are Barsboldia and Spinosaurus. If you're gonna play an herbivore apex, play Bars. Bars is really big, really tanky, and it is the second fastest out of the apex herbivores. Bars is a very quick dino. I mean, just looking at this, Bars is super quick. It's a very fast dinosaur. It does a lot of damage. Like, for instance, that sweep attack that it has, that I have equipped right now, that tail attack, that does a total of 110 damage. It is an incredible amount of damage. And Barsboldia also shares AoE with Spinosaurus. Spinosaurus also has a sweep attack. Similar cooldown, except Spinosaurus only does 65 damage because it changes in the water and it'll do knockback. And then Bars' tail slam. I'm not sure how much damage it does. I know it's less than sweep, but it does do AoE. And it costs stamina to use. But you can use it more frequently. And if you run Dazing Impacts, you can daze your opponents with that, or you can run Shockwave and make it easier for you to hit the AoE attack. Bars also has, knockback with this. So, like, if somebody gets around to the front of you, because Bars' turning is not good. It does not have good turning, which it shouldn't. Hadrosaurs would not have had good turning. They would have been fast and have explosive, power for speed like this. Hadrosaurs were definitely capable of that, but, they weren't very agile animals. So I think it makes sense for them not to be super agile. But someone gets out in front. Whoa. Did y'all see that? What? This is... I don't think that's supposed to happen. I don't think that's intentional. Oh my god, I just did it with both feet. Hold up. Let me can I get it to work with both? Oh my god. What is happening? All right. Let's focus. That's not the purpose of today's video. Yeah, that's so staying in. I don't know what happened there. But yeah, Barsboldia, not on top of doing good damage and being fast, and having knockback, which it also has a tail attack that does knockback if you so choose to use that. It also has buff calls that can keep you from doing your buff calls. It has another buff call that can reduce its bleeding rate, so it's not bleeding as much. And its venom as well. It'll increase its venom healing. And it also has a call that can buff its defense by 25%. And it also works for all of your group mates. Spinosaurus has the same thing. And on top of this, Bars is a really, really tanky dinosaur. It's got the same combat weight as all the other apexes, except I'm pretty sure Deinocheirus weighs less than the other apexes. Because Deinocheirus can change its combat weight. But essentially, Barsboldia has the same combat weight, but it has a lot more health. I think it has the same health as Spinosaurus, but Spinosaurus has more defense buffs, which is really interesting. Maybe because it's not as mobile. I think that might be why. But yeah, Spinosaurus also being really, really defensive. It has really good defense stats. Um, and it has better turning than Bars. So that makes Spinosaurus really good. I'm going to talk about Spinosaurus in the next segment. But essentially, Bars being fast, having good abilities, good defense, good healing, um, and the dash also helps. Having AoE and a sweep attack that does 110 damage. Bars all around is just a really, really good dinosaur. And it is probably the best herbivore apex at the moment. It's just that good, especially because of that dazed ability. On to Spinosaurus. Spinosaurus is the best carnivore apex at the moment, I'd have to say. It's really, really strong. It has a lot of defense buffs. And something that might be interesting to you is Spinosaurus has more consistent DPS than T-Rex. And if you don't believe me, I'll explain it to you. So T-Rex, its base attack damage on its bite is 60. Like when it bites down, it's 60. Spinosaurus is 50, which already disproves what I just said, right? Because Spinosaurus does 10 less damage. Well, T-Rex only has one avenue of attack, and that's biting. It doesn't have any auxiliary weapons. It's just bites. Bite, 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 bite. That's all it has. Sure, it has a tail attack as well, like Spinosaurus, which, for the record, does 65 damage, as I've said in the Barsboldia segment earlier. But Spinosaurus has a bite and a claw attack. And this allows you to be able to cycle these. So you could bite, claw attack, bite, claw attack, whereas T-Rex would just bite, 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 bite. It's not as fast. Although I'm pretty sure T-Rex has a slightly faster bite cooldown than Spino. But T-Rex has more wind up on its bite, whereas Spino's is instant. So yeah, Spino can cycle its bite and its claw attack, which its claw attack does 60 damage. So it does the same as a T-Rex bite. So Spino can cycle 50 damage and 60 damage in a face tank with a Rex, while also being able to buff its defense, or buff its armor, with Waterborne by 10%, plus Bright Sail, which is 15%, so that's 25% armor, and then Rallying Call, which is 25% as well. So that altogether is 50% increased defense. And Spinosaurus also has a subspecies, not this subspecies, the one with the circular sail. That one gives it 5% increased armor. So Spinosaurus can buff its armor by 55%, which reduces its damage taken. On top of it also having Ironclad, which is another 10%. So in total, it can buff its defense, or buff its armor, or your max, tanky Spino, with all the armor buffs, would have 65% armor. And it can cycle more damage than a T-Rex, which T-Rex can buff its damage, but like I said, Spino can attack faster. And it has a tail attack that does 65 damage. And it's easy to land because it has more range. Not to mention, Spino has what Bars lacked, and that's, turning. Spino can actually maneuver like Bars can't. You know what I mean? And on top of this, Spinosaurus is a semi-aquatic, which I do like how Spino is more semi-aquatic after its TLC. It is very nice. I love playing semi-aquatic Spino because I'll run Lunging Snap, which you can use Lunging Snap as a replacement for Bite. If you're running a semi-aquatic build, you can run Lunging Snap and have it be a replacement for your Bite. Because Lunging Snap, if used on land, Oh, what up? Let me see. Most of you guys probably already know that lunging snap when used in the water is like a dash attack. It winds up and it dashes and it'll bite something and it does a lot of damage. I've used that attack to kill plenty of dinos. It's a really fun attack to use. But when you use it on land, it's like a normal bite. And it's like slower than the normal bite, right? So how would this also be just as bad as the other bite? Well, because you can cycle it. You lunging snap, claw attack, and then lunging snap again. Because by the time your claw attack is done with its animation, your bite is ready to go. So you do bite, claw attack, and then bites off cooldown. And lunging snap does more damage than the normal bite. It just has more windup and a longer cooldown. That's what makes Spino better. And you may be wondering, okay, well then can't Tyrannotitan just bleed it out? Sure it can. But the problem with that is Spinosaurus is a semi-aquatic. It can just go to the water if it needs to. And Spino gets buffs from Bright Sail, which if you're inflicted with bleed, venom, toxin, poison, or fracture, you can get up to 50% or 15% armor. And Spinosaurus also has AoE damage. And that also does knockback. It's high damage and knockback, and it has a really wide radius. And if somebody gets too close to you, well, you can just hit them with... But those two attacks have a really long cooldown, so you can't spam them. So if you're fighting a Tyrannotitan, you can just hit them with knockback again and again and again, and spam them with an AoE ability that does a lot of damage. And they can't really do anything about it. Now, these abilities can be cancelled by knockback, but you see what I mean? Like, I can still turn with this. It has a wide radius that covers my entire body. But those two abilities both cost a lot of stamina. So either way, Spino can still go toe-to-toe with every other Apex in the game. Except for one, and that's Barsboldia. Barsboldia, pardon my language, Barsboldia is going to slap your shit like an uncooked turkey. Spinosaurus cannot beat Barsboldia in a legit 1v1 if the Bars knows what it's doing. Bars is going to be smoking that Spino pack. There's really nothing that a Spino can do against the Bars. It's just going to get cooked. Bars is essentially just a faster version of you. That's all it is. And that's why you're just going to lose that fight. But yeah, this is why Spino, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Spino and Bars are OP. I'm just saying that they have better consistent stats across the board that make them better fighters than any of the other vanilla Apexes. They're just better at what they do than the other Apexes are at what they do. And these next few segments are going to talk about essentially like what can we do to fix this problem? What can we do with the other Apexes to make them better at what they do so they can compete with what Spinosaurus and Barsboldia have to offer? And some of them require more than others. Alrighty, so starting off in alphabetical order here, we have Deinocheirus. Now, Deinocheirus is probably the lightest out of all of the herbivore apexes. It doesn't weigh as much as Bars or Trike because it can buff its combat weight. I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. It has less combat weight because it can make itself weigh more. So you might think, okay, well, just use the thing that makes you weigh more so you can compete with the other apexes. Well, it's not that simple. Because the thing is, With this, you have a swimming speed increase. You dry out slower on land. That's nice. You drain pounced creatures stamina more, which is nice. Um, and you become heavier when you're wet. That's really nice, right? Well, look at the claw attack. Claw attack that applies bleed. This attack's base damage is increased by 50% when you're dry, and an additional 50% if the target is also dry. So, if you use this while you're wet, and you weigh more when you're wet, then your claw attack gets no buffs. It might get a 50% damage buff, but that's about it. And claw attack's base damage does 35. And this is your best bet for spammable consistent damage. Because when you're playing Path of Titans, you at least, like on your dinosaur, you at least want one attack that costs no stamina that's good consistent damage. That way, if you run out of stamina, you have something. Like, you get something. So even if you're wet and the target is dry, so you get a 50% damage buff, half of 35 is 17 and a half, 17.5. Plus the 35 damage. Yeah, 35, yeah. I'm doing that right. So it's a 35 damage attack. Times 0.50. Yeah, I was right, 17.5. Plus the 35. Yeah, that brings your attack damage up to 52.5. Which you'd think, okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty consistent, right? That's more than a Tyrannotitan bite. That's more than a Spinosaurus bite. You think that's pretty good, right? Well, T-Rex does 60 damage on its attacks, on its bite. Eotriceratops does 55, and Bars does 110. Sure, it can't spam that 110, but you get the point. It's not consistent enough damage. Especially when Bars and Spino are way tankier than you. Eotric and Rex are just going to outdamage you. And out of all the Apexes, Tyrannotitan is going to be your best fight. Tyrannotitan is most likely going to be your best fight out of all of the vanilla Apexes because Tyrannotitan is usually just going to do less damage than you, unless it's running a damage build. Backhand is decent, but it's also not great. It really depends on how you use it, but for a consistent all-round build, backhand is not very useful. But it is very funny. Claw Frenzy. Charge forward attacking with multiple claw swings. Deals more damage if your target is dry. This attack consumes 50% less stamina if you're dry. You're immune to knockback during the duration of this charge. This is a very good attack. This is a very good attack. But it leaves you open for getting hit with other high damaging attacks, such as Eotrike Head Slam, Rex's Charge Bite, Tyrannotitan's Heavy Bite, Bars Sweep, Bars Tail Slam, Bars' Tail Smash, which is that charge up attack it has. Spino can hit you with the Snapjaw ability as well, which does 80 damage. It leaves you open, mainly because Claw Frenzy doesn't do too much damage. It should be doing a little bit more than this. But yeah, Hemorrhage Claw, it reduces the bleed heal of a target that you hit it with, or that you've just hit. But the thing is, about Deinocheirus, is it's not Tyrannotitan. Deinocheirus is not Tyrannotitan. It can make you bleed worse, but again, like, it is not built like Tyrannotitan is. Tyrannotitan can more efficiently bleed things out because it can bite with its, bleed. It uses bites for its bleed. It doesn't have to get right up close with its claws to do damage, because it can just, do drag bites and quick bites with its, base bite attack, and then it can use its juke to get behind you, which you can do with Deinocheirus, I guess, but Deinocheirus isn't as fast as Tyrannotitan. Deinocheirus isn't as fast. It isn't It doesn't have as good stamina. It doesn't have the same consistent damage. And then there's Riptide. Riptide applies bleed. Base damage is increased by 50% uh, if you're wet, and 50% more if the target is wet. And the attack cools down faster if you're wet. This, if you're running a water build on Duck, this is a must. You need Riptide. This does a lot of damage. A lot of damage if you get, like, those water buffs. But it's a wind-up attack. And it costs stamina. So, it's not going to be your best bet. It's a good attack, but I wouldn't rely on it all the time. Drenched Blows also is pretty decent, but it's only good if you're fighting other semi-aquatics. Sprinting stamina cost is probably your best bet. But you have to be dry in order to use it. Nictitating Membrane isn't all that great. And then Parched Scales increase stamina recovery and dry out faster on land, sprint faster when you're on land. It doesn't nerf your combat weight like it does for Suko, so it's pretty solid. Burly is probably your best bet. Increased stamina recovery, increased fracture healing. Juke is also good because Duck's mobility isn't that great. And Murder Goose is just good because you need as much damage as possible on Duck. So, what am I getting at here? What is the whole purpose of my Deinocheirus rant? Well, what I'm saying is that Deinocheirus, it doesn't need much, but it still needs help. So what I would do is I would kind of do what they did with Suchomimus, is I would take the 50% buffs and stuff that you get on like Claw Attack and Riptide and things like that, and I would reduce them down to like 35% or 15%, stuff like that. So it's not that much of a difference. But I would also increase the base damage of these attacks. That way it doesn't completely rely on these extra abilities in order to consistently do good damage. And Deinocheirus, it does solid damage. But again, like, look at this. Its turning isn't great. It does have a juke, though, which is also nice. But when it turns, like, it can't, like, really hit you as good. It's most likely just going to keep hitting your tail, which, most likely, more often than not, isn't going to do bleed. And that attack is decent. I'm not sure how much damage Riptide does. I'd imagine a decent amount if it's got a long cooldown like that. But I'm not entirely sure. I don't have too much experience on Deinocheirus, but I have enough experience to know that it is probably the weakest vanilla Apex at the moment. It definitely could use some slight tweaks, and that would definitely make it better. Also, what I would do is get rid of the Become Heavier when wet, and then just make Deinocheirus the same combat weight as everything else, consistently. I think that would make Deinocheirus a lot better. Deinocheirus can barely win a face tank against a Tyrannotitan because of all this. Deinocheirus should beat a Titan in a face tank all the time. It should always be beating Tyrannotitan in a face tank. If you use this claw attack on land, if you're dry and the other guy's dry, that is a 100% damage increase, which boosts your base attack damage to 70, which is more than a Rex Bite, which is very good. And you can buff that by an extra 50% with your Murder Goose buff, which would increase your base attack damage to 105, which is really, really good. That's a really, really good buff. So Duck isn't necessarily bad, it just needs some tweaks. Like, what I would do is I would buff its base damage to 40, and then change around some of the other percentage buffs. Which, if you have heard me rant about how to change the vanilla Apexes before, if you've heard me talk about this, then you already know that this is not going to be the last time I talk about it in this video. And I think you know exactly what dinosaur I'm referring to. Alrighty, Eotriceratops. Now, Eotriceratops, everybody knows Eo. Eo players are psychotic maniacs, right? Like they're just crazy people. They they just want all the smoke, all the problems. Which, like, I mean, if I was playing as a if I was playing as an 8-ton Ceratopsian, I would want all the problems as well. But here's the thing about EO. The damage it does has been getting nerfed in like every single update that it's had. Um, it used to do like around the same as Rex, but like now it's doing less than Rex. But like I'm not saying that it's bad and that it can't kill a Rex, because if you've seen my most recent Eotrike video, oh yeah, it can still kill a T-Rex. If you know what you're doing, you can cook a T-Rex. Unless it pulls off a good ambush. If a Rex pulls off a good ambush, you're pretty much dead, unless it makes a mistake. If the Rex makes a mistake during its ambush, then you can win. But if that Rex knows how to do a good ambush, then you're cooked. Which is kind of how it should be. But if the Rex doesn't fight you correctly and fights you head on out in the open, then yeah, you will win that fight if you play it correctly. But EO has two builds, right? It's got the attack damage build where you use sharpened horns, headbutt, head slam, and honed edge, which makes your sharpened horns even stronger, and it costs less stamina to use. Use overrun, which strong legs is pretty good. And backlash is already also, pretty good. Or well, I think it used to be good. I just don't think backlash is like good at all. I know it's like a reference to like Eotrike used to have a tail attack, and that's funny, which it is funny. Why would you give a Ceratopsian a tail attack? But overrun reduces the stamina cost of your charge by 50%. And since with Eotrike you might have to move around quite a bit during your fights, and your head slam costs stamina to use, and so does your sharpened horns, it's good to, like, when you use your charge, you're not wasting as much stamina. So this cuts your stamina cost on charge in half, which is really, really good, because charge does a lot of damage. It's easy to dodge if you're doing it at a distance, but if you're able to predict where somebody's going to go and you can hit them with that charge, then you're golden. You've got that really nice damage lead. Eotrike really does not need a whole lot in order to like stay good in the current like balance or in the current meta. I think all Eotrike really needs is a slight damage buff. I think EO could use a damage buff on its base attack and a slight increase on its head slam. Either that or a shorter cooldown on the head slam. I think personally, I think I would just make the cooldown shorter. I don't think head slam needs to do more damage because it already does plenty. It does a lot of damage, and I run the damage build. This is my normal build, aside from the fracture subspecies. I don't typically run this. But frilled bond with oh no, not frilled bond, hornlock. That's what it is. Hornlock with block and bony frill. That is your block build, and you lose out on the damage buff from sharpened horns and the extra damage from head slam, but you are super tanky. You can block high damaging abilities, and you can boost your armor up to 100%, if I remember correctly. Let me see. Gain 20% armor increase for 30 seconds for each hit received while using block, stacks up to 5 times. Yeah, if you keep using your block correctly, you can get 100% armor. So you can be tankier than a Spino. You can be tankier than a Bars if you run that build on EO, but it requires you to be hit. And people are still going to do damage to you while you're getting hit. So it's not like Spino or Bars where you can go into the fight and buff your armor. You're going to be buffing your armor while you fight. which makes it a bit more risky to use. And this isn't all that great when using it against bleeders. The block build is not very good against bleeders because bleed bypasses the damage resistance on block. Block doesn't mean anything to a Tyrannotitan or a pack of Allos. That doesn't mean anything. The Allos and the Titans are just going to bleed you out. Well, on base stats, Allo's not really going to bleed you out, if we're being real, because they nerfed Allo's bleed. But I'd imagine with its TLC, it's going to get some good bleed. But yeah, Eotrike doesn't need a lot. It just needs some better damage, like better base damage, which could also help with its block build to compensate. And I think, hot take, what they should do with Eo is give it a little bit of bleed. Give it a little bit of bleed on its horn swipe. I'm not asking for a whole lot. Not as much as Tyrannotitan, but maybe half of Tyrannotitan's bleed. Or half of Duck's bleed. One of those two. That way, when it's fighting something like a Tyrannotitan, it can keep the Titan in combat for longer, which is reducing its healing as much as possible. But yeah, that's essentially my idea for Eotriceratops. And on to the next dinosaur. Alright, so Tyrannotitan. Tyrannotitan really does not need much, because Tyrannotitan is already very good at what it does. I think all Titan really needs is for Blood Soaked to go back to 100% increase, or go up to a 80% increase in stamina recovery. Because the 40% stamina recovery is really not that great. You can hardly even notice it. But then to compensate for some other things, like if we're gonna buff the other apexes, we gotta do something with Titan's damage. So Titan's Bite should go up to 50. 45 damage is pitiful for an apex. It should be doing 50 damage. I don't care if it does bleed. I don't care if it's fast and maneuverable. It is 50 damage, and it is still an apex. So most things are slower, or most things are faster than a Tyrannotitan. And Stego can still punch above its weight class. So Stego is not Titan food. Stego can most definitely fight back. Heavy Bite is very, very strong on base stats. It does 100% increased damage. But you can reduce it by 35% with Feast. I think, personally, that is fine. I think Tyrannotitan's Heavy Bite is fine as is. And Feast, I think, should reduce the damage on Heavy Bite by 30% instead of 35. So then Heavy Bite's damage would be doing 70, but Titan's normal bite would be doing 50. Plus you'd have the byproduct of Feast. And that's really it for Titan. I think it's good. I think that Juke, I think it's fine. I think it might use a slight reduction in its cooldown. But again, you can just run Nimble Feet, and Juke and Dash get a far shorter cooldown, which is, I always run that, so I can use these abilities mid-combat more frequently. But I think a slight reduction in cooldown by, like, reduce it down to, like, 12 or 10 seconds. But again, like, because of Nimble Feet, I don't know. I don't think you could really, make that work. So, for right now, I think that Juke and Dash should just stay the same. I think they're fine as is. But yeah, that's essentially it for Tyrannotitan. It would just need some increased damage and a reduction in the damage nerf from Feast on the Heavy Bite. And then Blood Soaked going up to 80 or 100%. with the stamina recovery boost. And that's basically it for Tyrannotitan. That would put it in line with other apexes if they're also buffed. Saurus Rex. I'm not going to be blowing anybody's minds when I say that T-Rex after the TLC is a mixed bag. It is most definitely a mixed bag. It's strong, but it's not as strong as it probably should be. I've already talked about earlier with the Spinosaurus segment that T-Rex should get higher damage because this is the only avenue of damage it has, is just its normal 60 damage bite. Which 60 damage for a T-Rex? That's crazy. T-Rex should be doing much more than that. Or, well, not much more than that, but definitely more. 60 is kind of lame for a Rex. And I'll tell you why they only have it at 60. It's because of this stupid ability, Killing Blow. 20% increased damage when a creature not in your group has fracture or bone break within 50 meters. This ability pisses me off. And I will probably not be alone here. There are definitely other Rex players out here who probably agree with me. Killing Blow has kept Rex from being what it really could be. And I think the TLC would be perfect if we take Killing Blow and we cut it in half. Cut that damage increase in half and make it be a 10% damage increase. Then boost the base bite damage. And this counts for when you're chewing on clamp targets. The bite chew damage should do more, and so should the base bite. I'm thinking bring the base bite up to 70, or at the very least 65. I'd say just go up to 70. I think 75 might be excessive, but 70 I think would definitely be good for T-Rex. T-Rex should be doing a lot. And then, Killing Blow being at 10%, that would take the 70 damage bite. So, here, let me get out my calculator here, and I'll run the numbers for you. So, T-Rex's base bite damage is 60. We multiply that by the 20% damage increase you get from Killing Blow. And that comes out to 72 damage on your base bite, which, that's kind of good. That's kind of good, right? Well, if we change things around and we do 70 on the base bite, multiply it by 0.10, then that brings the base bite damage of T-Rex up to 77. So it's more than, what it was initially, with bite being at 60 and the percent being at 10. But at the same time, it's still less than it was before the TLC at 80 damage. So let's try this. What about 65 damage times 0.10? Hold on. Let me do that real quick. 65 times 0.10 plus 65. Okay. So that brings Rex's bite damage up to 71.5. Which that would be less than it was before. But Rex would be doing more base damage, and it would be relying on Killing Blow as much. But it would still be all around doing less damage, which that's not good. So, what if we try 66 times 0.10 plus 66? Yeah, if you were to change Rex's bite to 66 damage, then Rex's bite with a 10% buff on Killing Blow would go up to 72.6, which is about what it is right now, but it's like 0.6 more, so it's not that much. So you could change Rex's bite damage to do 65 or 66. Personally, I would go up to 70. I would go all the way up to 70. because 65 is too little and 66 is just kind of weird. It's at a weird middle ground, and it's just kind of weird to have that be at 66. So I would just go up to 70. Also, clamp on Rex, I think could use a slight reduction in stamina cost, because if you saw my latest Rex video where I clamp that Dilo, I clamp it and the Dilo bucks once, and half of my stamina bar is gone. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it should be changed. Now, I'm going to summarize this. I'm going to summarize this whole thing because I know I've been yapping a lot about T-Rex. This is probably going to be the longest segment, mainly because I'm just going over it, because there's a lot of people who would change a lot from T-Rex, and I'm correcting myself on older takes and everything on T-Rex. My summarization of this is T-Rex should get its bite damage increased to 70, killing blows nerfed to a 10% increase, and also power couple. Side note, power couple should probably get increased back to like 50% or 75% or something, because again, the sacrifice is not worth it if you run power couple. Just, just giving you that. Metabolism, Rex should get scavenger. It should be able to eat bones. And then give Rex tenderize. I know this might be controversial, but you have to build up to this ability. You have to build up to this ability with your bite attacks. And I think it would make Rex's fracture a lot better, because of how fracture healing works and everything. And like, fracture-based dinosaurs suffer more from bone break now than the person you've actually bone broken. Unless they're like a mid-tier, I guess. So, the thing is, with bone break, you get, some of you might not know about that, there's an immunity timer after you get bone broken. If you get bone broken, you immediately get that immunity timer. But how Tenderize works, it's a ability exclusive to Anodontosaurus, which I think should go to T-Rex as well, mainly because it's another slower fracture-based dinosaur. You would need to bite 10 times. You'd have to land 10 bites, and this would also count for your alt bites. So like bite, clamp, fracture, crushing bite, and bone snap. You would have to land 10 of one of those. Any of them count. If it's a bite ability, then it counts. You would have to land those 10 times to get a 5-minute debuff on your opponent called Tenderize. And they can't be tenderized after that, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong. But a fight with Tenderize has not lasted that long for me to be able to know exactly if there's like an immunity thing for Tenderize or not. But essentially how it would work is like, I land like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then I would be able to use that afterwards and finalize the bone break. Which, y'all saw how many bites that takes and how long that would take to actually get the Tenderize active. I think that's balanced. I think that's fairly balanced. And it would also coincide with Terrible Roar, because Terrible Roar would buff your bite damage and reduce your cooldown, so you'd be able to get Tenderize faster. But then you would sacrifice the ability to reduce people's fracture healing or to be able to buff your damage as much as possible. That would be the trade-off. And if you're running Killing Blow, it would be a 10% increase. So if you run this, you're missing out on status effects, recovery, and stuff, but this only works in a group. So you would be trading off 10% increased damage for 50% increased fracture damage. Which, personally, if they gave Rex Tenderize and more consistent base damage, and then nerf killing blows to 10%, I would run Blood Rivalry a lot more. Because 10% increased damage is very tempting. Which personally, I think this works much better. I think they need to change this to 10%. Because, think about it with Tyrannotitan. Tyrannotitan has Fresh Blood, which is a 10% damage increase when next to a bleeding creature. Killing Blow could be like Rex's Fresh Blood, except for it working with Fracture instead of Bleed. And you would be trading off Blood Rivalry, which would give you more Bone Break. It would give you more Fracture, so you'd be able to like consistently Bone Break. Because with the Tenderize thing, if you want to stack Bone Break, you can't just spam Crushing Bite. That's not what it is. If somebody has Tenderize, you still fracture them first, and then you hit them with Bone Break. All Tenderize does is get rid of Bone Break immunity. That's all it is. That's all Tenderize does. Which Bone Break immunity sells so many Rex ambushes and so many Rex fights. Because the enemy's just going to run away, heal up, and then bleed you out. Because most things in the game just do bleed. And having Rex do more consistent base damage would allow Rex to punish small tiers a lot better if you're getting jumped by like low tiers. Especially because tail attacks, sure, they're a lot more useful now. But again, like Clamp, it costs a lot of stamina, it's really loud, and has a really long wind-up. Which I don't mind it as much, I've kind of gotten used to it, but I think the stamina cost on it should be reduced, and the sound on it should probably be reduced or get like a different sound for it. And I think Bone Snap could probably get like, at the start of Bone Snap, it should be a little bit quiet before it starts to like really roar at you. So let me give you an example. So if you charge up a Bone Snap, as soon as you start charging it, like I barely even charged it, everybody can hear that. Everybody can hear that. That is super loud. And for the record, that charge bite, that Bone Snap, that does 80, I think it does 85 damage. I could be wrong. It's either 80 or 85 damage. It does a lot of damage. On top of doing a lot of fracture. And you can instant Bone Break with that. Which, this is pretty good for ambushes. But if you gave Rex Tenderize, you would do the charge bite, right? And they would be bone broken with the immunity. So you'd be rushing to try and get Tenderize on. But they only have Bone Break for 8 seconds. So you'd have to body block and like really sweat to try and get that on. But again, you'd have to like charge your bite up again to hit them with fracture. You'd still have to play with skill in order to get Tenderize to work properly. It's just the initial struggle with the ambush, the initial Bone Break to try and get Tenderize active, is the part that would like really require Rexes to play with skill. You'd have to be able to land your bites well. You'd have to dodge tail attacks and knockback. You'd have to land all of your bites consistently in order to be able to get the Tenderize active. Because I showed you earlier, even with the Crushing Bite, you still would need a lot more. Do need a lot of timing and skill in order to get that Tenderize buff active. Sorry for yapping a whole lot. This is just something I've been really passionate about, specifically for T-Rex, because I feel like this is something. My voice is cracking, but this is just something that I've been wanting to talk about, specifically with T-Rex. But I've noticed problems with other dinosaurs as well, and just because this part of the video is longer than the other segments, don't take that as me like favoritizing T-Rex just because it's my favorite. it's my favorite dinosaur, sure, and it's my favorite dinosaur in the game, and I know it can be better. It should definitely be better, but again, I don't want it to be OP. I don't want it to be OP. I want Rex to do consistent high damage, and I want that tenderized mechanic to just like really excel T-Rex's PvP. Because like, think about the build options you can do right now, and then boost Rex's base damage, and then reduce the buff on killing blows, right? And then all of a sudden, all sorts of build ideas come into your mind. Because like, think about it, if you give Rex Tenderize, and you run Charge Bite, and you hit people with Bone Break, and by some miracle, you've been able to hit all 10 bites consecutively in that ambush to get your Tenderize active. Now you gotta charge the bite and hit him. You have to charge that bite and hit him again in order to get that fracture on him again, which is gonna be a struggle, because even if you barely charge the bite, just to get at least a little bit of fracture on them, it's still not going to be a whole lot. But if instead of running Killing Blow, you were running Blood Rivalry instead, you could use this Charge Bite, and you would be doing a good amount of fracture on that. See what I mean? There's a lot more to work with here if you increase the base stats and then reduce the buffs. There's a lot more to work with there. And personally, I think what should happen is with all of the dinosaurs in-game, this goes with everything. You should get like a 10 or 15% damage buff if you're solo. I think there should be a solo buff. Kind of like how when you're in a group, you get like, what is it, like 10% increased stamina recovery or something? You should get like 10% or 15% increased damage if you're solo for each dinosaur in the game. I think that would definitely help out solo play a lot more. I don't know why they haven't done this. I don't think it should be an ability like it used to be. It could be like a passive or something. But again, it could just work like the group buff where you get increased stamina recovery if you're in a group. But at this point, I'm just rambling. I'm gonna cut this off here. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you agree. I hope you, if you agree with any of these, oh, there's a break in the map texture there. I can see the ocean underneath that. That's weird. But anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know if you have any ideas for the apexes. Let me know if you have ideas for some of the other dinosaurs, not just the apexes, because I have some ideas for what they could do with Allo's TLC, or what they could do with Stego's TLC, or Meg's TLC, or Metri's TLC. There's a lot of creativity to be had there, so please let me know your thoughts down below. If you disagreed with it, just keep it respectful in the comments and let me know. Let me know why you disagree. Let me know your thought process behind this. Let me know if you like this video. And subscribe for more content like this. I have some more ideas for other dinosaurs as well. I think I'm gonna make a video about like potential TLC ideas for like Stego, Meg, Metri, Alio, Campto, Allo, Thal, things like that. So I am going to shut this off here. Right after this, I'm gonna have a short little compilation of like the like a quick summary of essentially everything I've talked about here. Just like my summary of what they should do for each apex. And yeah, because I've done a lot of rambling in these segments, and that'll finalize my thoughts at the end. So thank you all so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next video.